From Junpei being turned into Perry the Platypus to Nanami's heartbreaking death, here are 13 of the saddest deaths in Jujutsu Kaisen explained. Starting off with a banger. Riko Amanai was a second-year junior high student who found joy in simple things, like spending time with her friends at school. She didn't get to go out much, so those little moments meant the world to her. However, behind her bright smile, Riko carried the heavy burden of being the Star Plasma Vessel, a role that required her to sacrifice herself by merging with Master Tengen to maintain the balance of Jujutsu sorcery. At first, she accepted this fate, thinking she had no other option to her life. But everything changed when she met Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto, as well as her caring guardian, Misato Kuroi. Their kindness and support gave Riko hope for a future she never thought she could have. For the first time ever in her life, she wanted to live and stay close with the people who made her feel loved and happy. But just as she embraced this dream, it was taken from her in an instant by Toji, who ended her life, shooting her without hesitation. Dang, that was a painful death. But an even more painful death would be Jogo's. While Jogo was a villain, he was just a cursed spirit who wanted nothing more than for his kind to replace humanity as the dominant species. He believed in the strength of curses and was determined to fulfill his goal of creating a world where they could thrive. Despite his pride and confidence, Jogo had a deep longing to be acknowledged and understood. In his final moments, Jogo faced Sukuna, who easily overpowered him, and as Jogo lay defeated, he broke down in tears. He realized that no matter how hard he tried, his dreams were beyond his reach. His emotions were raw and heartbreaking as he expressed his desire to be human, to feel what they felt, and to live as they did. Jogo's death was made even sadder by the memories of his companions, Hanami, Dagon, and the others, who shared his hopes for a better world for curses. He died knowing his dreams would never come true, leaving behind a bittersweet reminder of the fragility of ambition and the pain of being misunderstood. Man, that was such an emotional death. Speaking of emotional deaths, let's talk about the tragedy of Maki and her sister, Mai. Born into the Zenin clan, Maki and Mai were labeled as failures from the start, simply because they didn't meet the clan's expectations. Maki, born without cursed energy, was treated as a disgrace, while Mai, though possessing cursed energy, was seen as weak and unremarkable. The twins were hated by their family and were forced to live under the weight of rejection and despise. Maki eventually chose to rebel against the clan's judgment, while Mai remained, quietly enduring their ridicule. Despite their different paths, the bond between the sisters were unbreakable, but that bond was ultimately what sealed their fate. During a desperate moment, Mai made the ultimate sacrifice for Maki, pouring her entire life force into a weapon for her sister. In her final words, Mai admitted that she never wanted to be strong or fight, she only wanted to protect Maki. Her death was devastating because it wasn't just a loss of life, it was a loss of the one person who truly understood Maki's pain and shared it with her. But Maki and Mai weren't the only ones who suffered at the hands of the Zenin clan. Toji did too. From the moment he was born, Toji's life was shaped by cruelty, especially from the Zenin clan, who treated him as an outcast. They even once put him in a cage filled with cursed spirits as punishment, leaving him physically and emotionally scarred. That was where he got the iconic scar on his lip. Without love or guidance, particularly from a father figure, Toji never learned how to be one for Megumi. Toji's tragic death wasn't just about how he died, but the life he lived, a life that denied him the chance to show any humanity. Despite his brutal upbringing and violent nature in his final moments, he showed a rare glimpse of care for Megumi. His second death in the Shibuya arc was especially heartbreaking, with Takito Koyasu's voice acting adding a sense of sincerity and affection when Toji asked Megumi for his name. Next, we gotta talk about this woman who suffered a gruesome fate. Nagi Yoshino, Junpei's mother, was a kind and loving woman who cared deeply about her son's happiness. She was one of the few bright spots in his life, offering him warmth and support despite the relentless bullying he endured at school. But her life was tragically cut short in the cruelest way possible after Junpei brought Mahito into their home. Mahito planted one of Sukuna's fingers there, attracting a deadly curse that ended Nagi's life in her own home. Her death shattered Junpei completely, pushing him further into despair. Sadly for Junpei, Gege had even darker plans for him. Cause after losing his mother, Junpei was left broken and utterly alone. Mahito, sensing his vulnerability, preyed on his pain, pretending to be a friend while leading him further down a dangerous path. Junpei's desperation to find meaning in his suffering made his fate even more tragic. Just when he thought he found someone who understood him, Mahito betrayed him in the cruelest way, turning him into a cursed spirit. What makes his death even more heartbreaking is the added scenes in the anime's opening theme song, showing glimpses of the life he could have had if he hadn't died. which is just super sad. But not as sad as Kokichi's death. Kokichi, also known as Mekamaru, had one of the most tragic lives in Jujutsu Kaisen. Born with a fragile body due to his heavenly restriction, Kokichi couldn't attend school in person, so he used his ultimate Mekamaru proxy to live a life he never truly could. His dream was simply, he just wanted to walk alongside his classmates to experience a normal life. For a moment, it seemed like that dream might be realized, as he briefly gets his body fixed. But his hope was short-lived when Mahito killed him soon after, crushing his dream. What made his death even more tragic was his final conversation with Miwa, where he desperately tried to protect his friends during the Shibuya incident. Moving on, let's talk about Geto's death, which was incredibly sad. Suguru Geto was once a kind sorcerer who fought alongside Satoru Gojo. But after Eriko Amanai's death, everything changed. Her brutal murder shattered Geto, turning him against humanity and leading him down a dark path. His pain and loss twisted him into someone unrecognizable, someone who no longer believed in the world he once protected. Geto's hatred for humanity grew to a point where he sought to eradicate all of them, believing that only curses were worthy of existence. What makes his death even sadder is that Geto was the only one who saw Gojo as a person, not just a weapon. Their bond was deep, and when Geto ultimately became a threat, Gojo was forced to end his life. Despite their differences, Gojo's loss of his best friend hurt him deeply, making Geto's death not just tragic for him, but for everyone who knew them both. And while Geto's death was sad, Nobara's was heartbreaking. During the Shibuya incident, Nobara fought bravely, but was gravely injured in a battle against Mahito. She was left in a near-death state, alone and unable to say goodbye. Her death hit hard, not just for her friends, but for everyone who saw her as fierce and strong. What made it even sadder was how it affected Yuji. He was already emotionally shattered, watching the people around him fall one by one. Losing Nobara, someone he cared deeply about, was just another weight on his shoulders, deepening the pain of his already broken heart. Man, Yuji's life is so tragic. If you're finding these stories as impactful as we are and want to be entered in our video shoutout giveaway, simply subscribe, then comment, "I subbed," and you'll be entered. This shoutout giveaway goes to @CoolApostle. Thanks for being a part of the family. Let's get back to another tragic death. Choso was initially an antagonist. However, he became an ally after learning he was related to Yuji. His love for his brothers, both the death painting wombs and Yuji, defined him. In the final showdown with Sukuna, Choso fought to protect Yuji, even sacrificing his life to create a blood barrier. As he died, Choso thanked Yuji for being his little brother, a final moment that made the scene even more emotional. Yuji, with tears in his eyes, thanked his big brother for the first time. Man, when this gets animated, I'm gonna cry waterfalls. Next up is Principal Yaga, and his death was incredibly sad. At first, he came off as just another stern figure, but when he died, we saw a completely different side of him. Yaga wasn't just some tough guy, he was actually kind and gentle, especially when it came to his cursed creatures. He loved them like they were his children, creating them to keep him company because he couldn't stand being alone. His bond with Panda was especially emotional. When Yaga died, the scene hit hard. Panda, despite not being human, wasn't angry about the loss. Instead, he cried. It was one of the most heart-wrenching moments. Panda, who had never fully understood human emotions, felt the weight of the loss like anyone else would. Yeah, that moment had me bawling. And while Yaga's death was pretty sad, Gojo's death was completely heartbreaking. Gojo was a descendant of the Gojo clan and a rare prodigy. He was the first in 400 years to be born with both the Limitless and the Six Eyes, an event that caused a massive imbalance in the Jujutsu world. His immense power made him feared and revered by all. But despite his strength, Gojo was never seen for who he truly was. He was treated as a weapon, a tool to be wielded by others, and that's what made his death even more tragic. No one ever truly understood his pain, his loneliness, or the weight of the expectations placed on him, except for his students and close friends. Gojo had it all: strength, skill, and charisma. But beneath that, he was isolated. His death wasn't just a blow to the Jujutsu world, but to the people who finally saw him as more than just a weapon. And while that was super sad, Nanami's death had me crying for weeks. Nanami was a former student of Tokyo Jujutsu High and an underclassman to Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto, who left to become a salaryman before returning to Jujutsu sorcery years later. As a grade 1 sorcerer, he became a close mentor to Yuji Itadori. During the Shibuya incident, Nanami made the ultimate sacrifice in battle against Mahito, taking fatal injuries while protecting Yuji, losing his life in the process. But what made his death even more heartbreaking was the fact that the animators added anime-exclusive emotional scenes of him dancing and reflecting on his life with a bittersweet smile. Now those are some heartbreaking deaths. Did you cry? If not, I bet you will when you check out this video where we talk about all the saddest deaths in Demon Slayer. Go on, click it!